friends. Welcome back to Mama Lisa's. Today I wanted to make some bread. So come along with me while I make some Italian bread. I found this recipe a little while back on, Googling it. It's a great Italian bread recipe by Amanda Femora. I'll leave the link down below in the description. You can go find the recipe online because this is not my recipe. I've made it a bazillion times, but it's so good. So we're going to make this today. And I have here, I keep my yeast in the freezer, so I have this warmed up to room temperature. And so I've got a tablespoon and a half. And then it calls for a half a cup of warm water and a half a teaspoon of granulated sugar. And all I'm going to do is put that in a bowl and let that dissolve and let the yeast just proof and bubble up. Now, this one called for active dry yeast, which I have. I think it's like instant yeast, but I let it do the same process, which I know there's a difference in the yeast, but I'm kind of a novice here, so I'm learning the bread making as I go. But I've done it with the instant yeast the same way, and it turned out great. So here we go. So I've got my tablespoon and a half of the active dry yeast in there. And then I'm going to put a half a teaspoon of granulated sugar in there with it. Let's see. Half a teaspoon of granulated sugar. And I'm going to just put that in there with my yeast. Half a teaspoon sure does not look like very much, but that's what it is. Let's see, yeah. Well, I'm going to put that there because I'm going to need that again. And then half a cup of warm water. I'm just going to stir up my yeast and sugar. And then I just have this little meat thermometer that I use to tell me when my water's to 110 degrees. I'd like to go with the digital thermometers, but right now this works. That's about 120 degrees. You want it right at about 110, maybe 111, but not much more because you don't want to kill your yeast. But you want to activate it too. Perfect. Just a hair past 110, but my air temperature in here is a little bit cooler. My thermometer says 69, but I don't believe it because it's a little bit cooler. So I'm going to just dump this in there with my yeast and my half a teaspoon of sugar and give that a whisk. Alrighty. And I'm going to let that set and dissolve and bubble. I got foil in here. I was going to cover it with a little bit of plastic wrap to keep the gases in there so it bubbles up a little bit faster. But let's do this. There we go. That'll do it. That may not be necessary, but my brain thinks it is, so I just put that in there. Alrighty, while that is bubbling, in another bowl, I'm going to put, let's see, in a large bowl, you're going to add 3 cups of flour. So here's my flour. And I'm just going to use my finger because this is for us. My bread's for me. If you've not had Italian bread at home for sandwiches and whatnot, it's the best. Especially homemade. There's 2. And like I said, this is the easiest bread I've ever made. Now I'd like to try some of that sourdough starter bread, but that's a whole nother thing. I just mastered this, so the sourdough will be somewhere down the road, and you'll come along with me while we do that. Well, at least you can come along with me if you want. So we have our 3 cups of flour in here. And then we're going to add to that 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. And here we go, the sugar again. One, 2, 3. Alrighty. And to that, we're going to add our salt, which is a tablespoon of salt. And I'm using the Redmond Real Salt. It's such a pretty colored salt. It's like a light pink almost, but it's so good. I'm going to add that, to the flour and sugar. And then we're going to add our oil, a 1/2 cup of vegetable oil. And I use olive oil for this one. And I'll drop more. There's that. Alrighty. To the flour, salt, sugar, and oil, I'm going to add 2 cups of hot water. And that, it doesn't really say how hot to make it, so I'm just going to make it good and hot because, like I said, the air temperature is cold, and by the time I get the yeast in there, it'll be cool. So. 1. 2. Oops, I forgot to turn you back around so you could see what I was doing. Sorry. There we go. All right. Let me move this big old thing of flour out of your way. Okay. And there I've got our flour, salt, sugar, oil, and water. And I'm going to put that on my stand mixer with the paddle attachment, and I'm going to incorporate all that until it's just nice and sticky, and then I'll add my yeast to it. Oh yeah, that's good. Let me show you this. Can you see that, guys? There you go. It's nice and bubbly, just perfect. So I'm going to mix that. Get a rubber spatula to make sure it's all off the sides and down in there. I love making bread. This is probably one of the funnest things that I do. I love it. And then just to see the finished product, it's really fun. Now when it don't turn out, of course it's not very fun, but when it does turn out, it's really fun. Okay. There's that. And let me move my mixer over so you can see. There we go. Okay, let me just turn it on a little bit more and finish incorporating the first 3 cups of flour, sugar, salt, and oil. And that looks really good. Now I'm going to add my yeast. And that's ready to go. Let me get my rubber spatula. And then I'm going to turn it on and go get my bacon out because I can smell the bacon. And we don't want to burn the bacon. That's a sad day when you burn the bacon. Okay. I love cooking and being in the kitchen. Although when you start multitasking, it's like, whoa, you got too many irons in the fire. Alrighty. And then this one just says, add 2 to 3 more cups of flour until mixed and well blended. And you just want it to be to where it's a sticky dough. It's going to be nice and sticky, and then you stop. And then you just cover it and let it just set and rise till it doubles its size, which it'll overflow this bowl. And then I'll show you what we do. It's called no kneading is required, which it really doesn't. I mean, you just do a little turning over, but that's about it. So let me get the rest of my flour in. Okay. Let's take this one off. Let's put our dough hook on here. Let me get all that off there. I'm sure it's all off, but it's just kind of one of those OCD things. You just want to make sure you get everything off of it. Alrighty. Okay, now I'm going to add one. Let me... I'm going to use my knife here to make it exact so we don't go over. Okay, there's one. And I usually end up doing about the whole 3 cups of flour additional. And then when you're done and you're rolling it out on your parchment paper, it says you can add almost up to a whole nother cup, but the key is you don't want to dry the dough out. That's the main key. I've rarely added an additional cup, but usually all my flour is always added in here and then I'm good. Which ends up usually being pretty much a total of about 6 cups. Depending on the air. You know, if the air is humid, it takes a little bit more. If the air is dry, it don't take as much. So there's that. There's the one. Okay, I'm gonna turn that off here, and then I'm gonna put the second cup in and see how that looks. Because the air is kind of dry today, so I don't want to add too much flour. So we've got 2 added for a total so far of 5. The 3 from when we added the 2 cups of hot water and sugar and oil and salt. And then I've added the 2 additional. And this recipe says you can do 5 to 6 cups of all-purpose flour. Add more if you need to get it to be a pliable dough. So far we've got a total of 5. And it's starting to look pretty dry for the 5. I mean, not dry, but you know, almost just about incorporated well enough. Let's see here. Go ahead and get a whole cup, and we will add it a little bit at a time. I'm thinking I may not need much. Okay, that's good enough. So we're going to do 5.5 cups today, because like I said, the air's kind of dry in here. I haven't ran my heat, but I have my little fireplaces going, and that dries the air out pretty good. Let's see. I'm going to let that go. Really, the the stand mixer pretty much kneads it for you. So you really don't have to do a lot of dough kneading. Yeah, I think we're good. Okay. Let's do this. Alrighty, and that's a nice sticky dough, just the way we want it. Perfect. I'm just gonna smooth that down and I'll show you what it looks like here. Alrighty, and there's our wet sticky dough, just the way we want it. And what I'll do with that is I'll put a piece of clear plastic wrap on it and set it over there close to my oven where it's warm at, and it'll only take about maybe 45 minutes to an hour to rise, overflow in this bowl. And then I'll turn it out over a lightly floured surface, and I'll form it, but I'll show you how we do that. Our dough is ready to go. It's done rising right there. You can see it looks great. It totally filled the bowl. And then I got my surface here floured and ready to go. I really don't use very much that I reincorporate, only just to fold it over. But you'll see here. And I use this the sticky kind of saran wrap, which I should have sprayed it, but it'll be all right. It'll come off. 400. I had at 450, so I'm gonna turn that back down to 400. I don't know why I thought it was 450, but okay. And then all you're gonna do is dump this out on your floured surface. Oh, yeah. Just dump it out there. Yep, see, it's sticky all right. It's a nice dough. Okay. And then all I'm gonna do is just start folding that over. And until it's easy and pliable to work with. And that's really all the more flour you're going to work into that, just to make it pliable. Not dry. It should feel soft and real supple. There you go. And that's all of that. And this you can make into 2 loaves or 3. However long you want to make them. If you make them into 3, you're going to make them smaller loaves. But I'm going to do 1 regular size loaf, and then the other one I'm going to try to cut into mini loaves, because I make strombolis for friends of mine, and I usually make it on the whole 1 Italian loaf, but then my toppings tend to fall off. So this time I'm going to try to make mini loaves. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to cut this in half. And then I'll do my first loaf and I'll show you that. There we go. There's that. I'll put that over there. Okay. Still a teeny tiny bit sticky when I cut it in half, but it's still good. Okay. I'm going to just roll that out to about however long I want it to be for that pan. I'm going to make it a little bit wide. That way when I roll it up. And let's see, that's the size of my pan. Pretty close. Let's see. We'll do it a little bit longer and then that's it, because I like nice and round to make big pieces of bread for sandwiches. So all you're going to do here once you roll that out is you're just going to start rolling it like you would a jelly roll back in on itself. And I try to brush off some of that flour because I don't want all that flour on it. But I mean, it's not